luxury of serving on different types of governments. I know there are several types allowed under New Jersey statute, but the only one I know is the Township Committee. So hard to say what's best about it compared to the others. But some of the characteristics that you find in it are, at least in ours in Holmdel, we have 5 elected members elected on staggered terms. The setup currently allows the Township Committee members to select from amongst their membership the mayor each year at the annual reorganization meeting, which just occurred for 2022. And so the 5 members are equal members. The mayor serves as the chairperson to run the meetings and helps direct discussion during the meetings, but has an equal vote with the other members. I think that's a good thing about the Township Committee form of government, that all members have one vote on all matters. I'm not sure if I have anything more on this question at the moment, and in the interest of time, it may be best to move on to other questions. And if I think of other things that stand out along the way about the Township Committee form of government, I can try to highlight them.
Okay, great, thank you. Does any commissioners have any follow-up questions to that? Okay.
I actually do. Quick question. Okay, so as mayor, you had certain duties that you were able to perform. You had equal vote, but other duties. Did you feel that was sufficient, being the mayor, having those duties, but the equal vote? Do you think that was like the perfect way?
Well, being a relatively modest sized municipality as opposed to a city like say Newark or Camden, where being a mayor is a full-time position and you're actually hands-on every day running the town. In a situation such as ours, the governing body are policymakers and guide and give direction to the paid township administrator and the department heads and staff. I don't think that when I was serving as mayor, I felt like I didn't have enough say in how the township was being run. Again, I was a member of a 5-member governing body, and now on certain issues, of course, there always were times when I wish I had more say or more control or more power. And unfortunately, for the voting population, many people feel that the mayor is a very powerful position, but in the Township Committee form of government, it's it's more of a figurehead and ceremonial. I had the pleasure of officiating at several wedding ceremonies as mayor. One of the pluses of the jobs, if you like that sort of thing. But I did enjoy that.
I do have a question too about that. Just following up from what Jan said. Given that your power isn't any greater than anybody else on the committee, but you do appear to the general public to be important, do you think that's deceiving at all to the general public?
Well, in a way it is, and it works both ways. On the one hand, the general public may expect more of you as mayor, thinking that you have magical powers to do dramatic things for the town, when in fact you don't. So that's a bit deceiving. Now, sometimes it goes the other way where someone who has been selected to be mayor believes that he or she has more power than they're supposed to really have by ordinance or regulation, and takes it to an extreme. And so a lot of it does have to do with the personality of the person who's in that seat. And some will wield that mayoral gavel as if you're a king or queen, which is, I believe, not right.
Okay, good. Thank you.
Any other questions from other commissioners? Okay, seeing none, we're probably jumping a little bit. There may be some overlap, so I may exercise some discretion here. But the next question is, what could be improved in the way our current township committee form of government works?
Well, most of my thoughts in that regard are actually embedded in answers to the other questions later on,
Okay.
which is actually involving considering changing the form of government. But I take it that what you're after with this question is, if we were to stay with the township committee form of government, what could make it better than it already is? Is that what you were aiming for there?
That is one of them. Basically, it's a different way of couching it. Is, what are the weaknesses of the township committee form of government? Maybe that's a different way of asking the same question.
Right. Well, I'm not sure if I have any magic answers here, but as I was alluding to before, depending on who is on the governing body as a township committee member and who is serving as mayor, there can be times when individual members of the township committee, including the mayor, are literally out of control. They're either making personal attacks on fellow members of the governing body, or attacking people's positions, not based on merit, but on something that is irrelevant. And at times I kind of wished, at least when I was on the township committee, that there was some sort of a sergeant at arms, I'll say, somebody who could say, time out, we're whoever's speaking, you're out of order, you're off track, you're inappropriate. We were basically a 5-member self-policing group, and I certainly felt at times I was the brunt of inappropriate remarks and attacks, and I basically had to just either suck it up or fend for myself as best I could. There was really nobody to step in and say, hey, wait a minute, guys, let's cool down and be more civil. So, and I'm not sure if that would be, if that position, how you would come up with some referee or sergeant at arms person, whether it be a member of the township staff or whether it be an appointed position or elected position, or how you would do that. But sometimes I wish there was a referee in the room.
Okay. Any follow-up questions from commissioners? Okay, seeing none. Let me ask the next question. Under the township committee form of government, the mayor is elected by members of the township committee, as you said earlier, at the beginning of the year, and serves a 1-year term. The mayor is directly elected by voters in other forms of government. Do you have any thoughts or comments on the mayor being directly elected by voters instead of the township committee?
I think that the way it has been done, where the township committee members select the mayor, it makes some sense, but I think it would be preferable if the voters could select who the mayor is I think it would allow for more say, if you will, from the voters, and probably would lead to less partisan types of politics, because instead of the majority party choosing a member of their own to be mayor, the voters would be able to choose whoever they felt was the best person. And it may take a little bit of the partisanship out of things. And also, if the mayor was not doing a particularly effective job in that role, it would allow the voters a better chance for making a change. So I would lean towards direct election of the mayor.
Any follow-up questions from other commissioners?
Hey, Larry, if a mayor was elected, it wouldn't just be for 1 year, it would be multiple years. Do you think that it's better to serve, for a mayor to serve for, let's say, 3 years as opposed to just 1 year under the current form of government?
Well, that's a good question, and it's a tough one, because if the mayor's doing a decent job, 3 years is not a bad stint to be a mayor. But if you're doing a terrible job and the voters that don't like it, they have to wait 3 years to make a change. That seems like an awfully long time to wait. So I'm not sure how one would get around that. I will say, from the exposure I did have while I was in township government to some other towns' forms of government, oftentimes a mayor, like in a town council form of government, only votes when there's a tie, as a tiebreaker. So they're not as powerful. They don't have that regular voting capability. So if they are on the town council for 3 years, it may not be so terrible because they don't carry as much weight with the power of the vote that the other council members have.
Any other questions? Okay.
Zach,
Yeah,
I'm sorry.
well, I don't know, maybe we'll get to this later. So this question doesn't speak to what power the mayor does or does not have. It's just whether you elect him or her directly or not. Are we going to talk in one of the other questions about the role of the mayor, I believe? So I guess
Okay.
I'll hold my question.
Okay, and yeah, you certainly have an opportunity at the very end if there's any outstanding questions that you feel that you need to ask. So the Holmdel Township Committee consists of 5 members, and I think we touched upon this a little bit, but they're elected at large by the township, by the residents for a term of 3 years on a staggered basis. So effectively, because of the way the math works, this means that there's a local election every year. In some years, if 1 member comes off, in other years, 2 members comes off. Other forms of local government have 1 to 3 years between local elections. There are some that are not on a staggered basis, and they actually have elections every 4 years. There are some that, even though they're on a staggered basis, but because their terms are 4 years, they only have elections every other year. And depending on when they're in effect, even number of years or maybe even odd number of years. Do you have any thoughts or comments on annual local elections? In other words, we have one basically every year.
Right. Well, I can think of some pros and cons. So let me give you the pros first. By having an election every year, it does give the voters a chance to express their satisfaction or dissatisfaction with the governing body, or at least with those members whose terms are up. And that's a good thing. It also maintains relative stability on the governing body while allowing for gradual changes, because only 2 seats or 1 seat at a time are up for election. So the makeup of the governing body changes gradually rather than suddenly, which allows for some continuity. There is a learning curve to being on a governing body, and it's nice to give people a chance to be on there for a year or 2 or 3, and then give them a chance to be reelected. So so anyway, those are some positive reasons for having elections every year. Some of the cons is that on years when there's not a U.S. presidential race or one involving members of the U.S. Congress, the voter turnout has been historically extremely low, and it would be better, of course, to have more voter participation when electing our local officials. Another con is that elections are expensive to run. There's a lot of equipment that needs to be moved into place, poll workers who need to be paid, and ultimately it's the taxpayers who fund the elections. So, if you don't need to have an election every year, and if the elections for the local races can be combined in the same years as other races higher up the ticket, that could save on some costs and also promote better voter turnout.
Any follow-up questions on that? Okay. I'll move on to the next question. Statutorily, the Township Committee is limited to 3 or 5 members. Holmdel's Township Committee has 5 members. Do you have any thoughts or comments on increasing or decreasing the number of members of the Township Committee?
Well, I think 3 would be too few. 5 seems to be a decent number, but expanding it a bit to perhaps 7 may also work, and may allow for a bit better representation of residents and a wider diversity of views on various issues.
Okay. Any follow-up questions?
Well, to be clear, it's a comment that statutorily you can't go above 5 in the township committee form of government. So to increase it, you have to change the form of government.
That's correct.
Okay.
You said 5 or 7. If it were not an issue, if you could do it, seeing how Holmdel is now, do you think it would be better to have more people? Or you think 5? I mean, if you had to make a choice, maybe you can't, but if you were.
I don't know. I on the one hand, people like to have efficient government, and when you have a smaller number of people at a township meeting speaking and debating and voting, the meetings presumably should happen more efficiently than if you had 7 people or 9 people. On the other hand, the objective of government is to try to represent the people as best you can, and serve them well. So just as as mayor, when I did have the ability to run the meetings, I welcome public comment. I also tried my best to give ample opportunity to all the members of the governing body to share their views. And so I think diversity of views and listening to everyone is important, and maybe increasing it would allow for, as I say, a wider diversity of views at the expense of possibly having the meetings take a little bit longer and decision-making be a little harder to reach. But
What about in terms of workload?
I don't know. Each member of the governing body, and you know this as well as anyone, Janet, having been on the township committee, is assigned to a couple of departments, one or two departments, to be the liaison between the township committee and those departments. And I think we tried to have two members of the governing body to be co-liaisons in many cases. I think we were able to cover the workload pretty well, but I think there were times when things got a little overwhelming, and it would have been better to have a few more hands on deck.
So certain ordinances require a 2/3 majority in order to pass. I believe bond ordinances fall in that category. So with a smaller group, with 5, any 2 can block something. If you make it a little larger, then it would be less easy for a small minority to block things. Do you see that, or did you see that as an issue in Holmdel when you were serving that might be improved with a larger group, or was that not an issue?
I guess I didn't really think about that when we were voting on things and bond ordinances in particular. We knew what the rules were in terms of simple majority for most matters, and a super majority needed to pass a bond ordinance, and we played by those rules. I guess maybe I wasn't thinking in terms of potential changes to the governing body makeup when we were voting in real time to say, oh, gee, let me do the math here. If we had 7, then we would only need this many votes.
Then you need 4. 5. Yeah.
Yeah. So.
Well, to state Zach's question another way, do fewer members lead to a dominance of control in some cases, to prevent progress? That's what I think we'd like to know, versus having more members, which may even things out a little bit from potentially control being exercised over things that need a greater thought process to them.
Yeah, well, as with so many issues, it depends what side of the issue you're on. If you're very supportive of an issue, you'd love to have the 3 votes are good enough to pass it. If you don't like it, and the way things are going, you'd like more strength to block something. So,
Well, there's more people to blame then, actually. Potentially, anyway. So good. Thank you, Larry.
Any other questions? Let me just make one comment just to clarify, just in case for those who don't really follow that closely. So when Zach mentioned about the fact that right now we have 5 members on the township committee, so to have a supermajority for a bond ordinance, that requires 4 out of the 5 votes to vote yes. And what that means is that if you have 2 individuals who says no, they effectively can block that. And we, in fact, last year did have that issue. There was a bond ordinance for road improvement, certain amount of money for first responders and so on. But there was an issue where 2 members want to bring other issues on the table on top of that, and they were able to effectively, on a very short-term basis, but did block that. So I think that's where the genesis of that question. Let me move on. Just going to make sure I know that Nancy's patiently they're waiting there. But so elections on the township committee form of government are held on a partisan basis. This means that we have basically 2 local elections every year. There's a primary in June and a general election in November. Other forms of local government allow for council members to be elected on a nonpartisan basis. Do you have any thoughts or comments on local elections held on a nonpartisan basis, such as done for the Board of Election?
Board of Education.
I'm sorry, Board of Education. I stand corrected.
In my time on the township committee, I've seen firsthand many instances where partisanship, that is the identity with a particular political party, has often gotten in the way of sound decision-making and good government benefiting the people. Issues should be debated on the merits, and there should be analysis done that is based on fact-finding and reasonableness. And with the partisanship comes a blind loyalty, if you will, whether it be to a certain ideal of that party, or loyalty to a party boss who may be pulling the strings, say at the county level, who may not even be a Holmdel resident. So if you've got too many strings pulling on you when you're trying to make a decision, it takes you away from the most important string, which should be the voters. What's best for the people you're serving? And that's a problem I have with partisanship. Another consideration is oftentimes voters, when they're going to the polls, will make a decision on who to vote for, whether based merely on whether you happen to have an R or a D attached to your name. In other words, what column you appear in on the ballot. And it would be much better if people got to know their candidates and where they stood on issues, and what their record of service to the town has been, what their experiences are that qualify them for a position on the township committee. And again, having partisan elections gets in the way of all of that. And unfortunately, the voters sometimes, not always, but sometimes make a bad choice, not knowing really much about the candidates at all, but just assuming that an R is better than a D, or a D is better than an R. It's not always the case.
I always thought an A is better than a D, but that's okay. Any follow-up questions on that? Okay. Next question. Members of the Township Committee government are elected on an at-large basis. Do you think the citizens of the township would be better represented if we elected some or all the members of the committee by wards, that is, subsections in the township?
I think there's some merit to considering that. We do in Holmdel have considerable diversity in terms of the geography, topography of the town. The roads and traffic are different in different parts of town. Development density, parks, infrastructure, they vary quite considerably in different sections of the town. And the needs of the people in those sections, I think, are, while they certainly overlap in many ways, they do vary. And sometimes I did see on the township committee a lot of attention being paid to one section of town, and not enough thought being given to another part of town. So I do think it might benefit us if we had some way to distribute the members of the governing body to represent different parts of the town, to make sure that everyone's views and concerns could be heard.
Okay. Any follow-up questions? Seeing none. Next question. With the exception of a bond ordinance, and I think maybe a couple other minor exceptions, the Township Committee form of government does not provide for an initiative or referendum by petition, like for an ordinance from township citizens. Do you have any thoughts or comments on this?
Well, I think that it's important when there's an issue that concerns a number of people that they have an ability to bring that issue forward for consideration. Currently, the way it's typically done is to have a group of people attend a meeting of the governing body and speak at a public meeting, or write a letter, or send in a petition to the governing body. And those are all valid ways to get opinions expressed, but it doesn't guarantee that the governing body will take the issue seriously and do anything about the residents' concerns. I would think that it would merit consideration to look at a way that if enough voters, enough residents were concerned about an issue, to get enough signatures on a petition that it would require that the governing body take some action on that issue. I'm not sure what the right threshold would be, but in other jurisdictions, there is the ability to have initiative or referendum, and I always like to see public questions on the ballot in addition to having candidates on the ballot. But again, right now it's the governing body that determines what public questions go on the ballot, not the voters themselves. So I think it would be a good idea to consider initiative and referendum.
Thank you.
Yeah, the threshold is generally 10% of the voters in the last election. I think that's in these other forms of government which permit referendum.
Mhm.
So it
Okay.
actually,
Any other follow-up question? Okay. Next question. If you could make changes to the form of government, what would they be and why?
Well, I think I probably alluded to this in some of the other answers, but I believe that the people would be better served by a nonpartisan form of government, and possibly one that involves additional members of the governing body, and if there was some way to get a better geographical diversity, so you had people from different sections of town, different areas of town in the governing body, that would be beneficial. And the direct election of the mayor, I don't have a really strong opinion on that, but I think it's certainly worth exploring how it has worked in other jurisdictions. And it would give the voters a better direct voice and a direct connection to the mayor who's serving them.
Okay.
And then this is less, I'll just make one additional remark. This is less about the form of government, but more about policies for how government operates. There has been some improvement in this direction over the years, but it always troubled me that the public comment period at a public meeting was at the end of the meeting after all the decisions had been made on the agenda items. And we should always be mindful that whatever form of government we choose for ourselves, that the elected officials are there to serve the public, as best they can, and to listen to the public and to give them a chance to be heard on issues that matter to them. So I just hope that we always have the opportunity for public comment before votes are taken and decisions are made.
Larry?
I know, before I open up, so just, we know that currently both at the Township Committee and on the Board of Ed, I believe that they do now allow public comments on agenda items, and then there's a more general public comment at the end. So it looks like some folks have listened to you, Larry, and have implemented that. So any follow-up questions on that from anyone else?
Yeah, this Bill, I think given your job with Green Acres, you have the opportunity to work with a lot of different governments, mostly, I guess, in the northern part of the state. Have you noticed, do you have an opinion whether one form of government is more responsive to you and your job than another?
I have to say, Bill, most of the elected officials I deal with, I don't necessarily know what form of government that township has, that town has. Oftentimes, I'm either talking to a mayor or one member of the governing body who has a particular interest in open space preservation. And so I just have one point of contact in that town typically. And I guess I haven't thought to have the discussion about what type of government do you have in your town, and so I can't really say that I've noticed a big anything that I would say is remarkable about one form of government over the other based on my experiences at Green Acres. Sorry.
Okay, that's all right.
I just have one question, and I think maybe this is what Zach might have been getting to earlier. You're not totally convinced as to whether we should elect the mayor or not. We should leave that to more exploration, is what you were saying. But the issue of having more power in one individual on the township committee, would that be something we should be considering? I mean, some towns have their mayor having more power than other.
Yeah, just to give more context to that, because I was going to bring this up. Thanks, Jerry.
Yeah.
So there are various alternative forms of government. Some of them vest more power in the mayor, and some of them they're different the way we were asking a lot of these questions, but the mayor's power is much the way it is in the township form of government, where the mayor is a figurehead and can set the agenda and can represent the town, but only has a single vote, and it acts as part of the council. So either is possible. So I guess what we're looking for comment on is, do you think our current structure, where the mayor has the current power to form an agenda and be a spokesperson and a figurehead, versus someone who we actually vest more power in and maybe sits a little higher, votes when there's a tie, or has veto power? What sort of comments do you have about alternatives such as those?
Well, I think one has to be very careful when doling out power to any one individual of the governing body over the others. The ability to set the agenda and be a spokesperson for the town, even if that person has the same voting power on say a 5-member governing body, that often is used to exercise quite a bit of control. So the current setup we have, even though it's not considered a strong mayor form of government, actually does does invest some additional powers, if you will, to the person who has that mayoral seat. I would I'd hesitate to have a situation where the mayor had such strong powers that they could completely overrule the other members of the governing body. Like if a vote was taken and the mayor said, I don't like it, and even though the majority voted for it, I'm against it, and so we're not going to do it. That would sort of defeat the purpose of having multiple people on the governing body with diverse views coming to a consensus opinion. Might as well have a king or a queen. You don't need a governing body anymore. So.
Well, we do have a kin. Ha ha ha.
Yeah.
Any other questions? Okay, last chance, guys.
All right. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Larry.
Yeah.
Very good.
Thanks, Larry.
Larry, thank you. We appreciate it. Sorry to put you on the spot a little bit. I try to emphasize that because of your experience, we're trying to focus a little bit more on the township committee form of government, but we press you on some of the other things. As you can see, there are other options, and we thought we'd get the benefit of your some of the insights you have, because you may have dealt with some of the limitations and perhaps say, oh, gee, I wish we had this or that or whatever forms of government. So we appreciate that. I realize that's not your primary experience in terms of the forms of local government, but again, really appreciate it and appreciate your time. Feel free to stay on if you want, but if you got, you need to leave, jump off as well. But I think Nancy would love to have you stay and listen a little bit as well too. But
Yeah.
Thank you. I appreciate it, Larry.
I appreciate the opportunity to share some thoughts with you all. And I when I first saw the agenda and I saw that I was up first and Nancy was second, I thought, well, she drew a good straw, because I wasn't quite sure what to expect or how this would go. So Nancy, I hope I paved a good way for you.
Oh, absolutely.
I'm interested to hear what you have to say. If my screen should go dark for a moment, it just means I'm grabbing a quick bite to eat for dinner. I rushed home from Trenton, so forgive me for that, but I will be listening.
Well, thank you very much, Larry, again, for the time and everything. So what, next speaker, I'm going to turn it over to Bill, just because I'm sure that you guys don't want to listen to me all night drone on. So Bill, you have the honor.
Thanks, Ken. So I'm going to read a quick bio about Nancy so that we're all familiar with her. And personally, I've known Nancy for a couple decades, I think, here going on. So anyway, but for the benefit of everybody, Nancy was born and raised in Hudson County and eventually moved to the Ocean Monmouth area in 1976. She has a BA in biology, chemistry, and a master's in education. She has taught all levels of science at Freehold High School, including the medical science program for 17 years. Nancy held numerous leadership positions in the local, county, and state education associations, which led to her being hired by the New Jersey Education Association full-time in April of 1993. For the last 28 plus years, she has been responsible for labor negotiations and labor management resolution in Middlesex County school districts. Nancy moved to Millstone Township in 1998 and was elected to the office in 2003. Nancy was the first woman ever to serve on the Millstone Township Committee. She was elected by the community 6 times, serving as mayor a total of 9 years, deputy mayor 4 years, and committee woman 5 years. During the entire 18 years, she was a member of the Township Planning Board and the Council on Affordable Housing Work Group. In addition to those responsibilities, she worked closely with the Agriculture Advisory Council, the Farmland and Open Space Preservation Committee, and the Historic Commission. She was instrumental in the acquisition and preservation of thousands of acres of farmland and open space during her term in office. Nancy actively raced standardbred horses for approximately 18 years. She served as the chair of the Monmouth County Save the Horse Committee and worked in promoting open space pace held at Freehold Racetrack. Currently, she serves on the New Jersey Sire Stakes Board of Trustees, which is supported by the New Jersey Department of Agriculture. This committee has worked very hard and has made great strides in reviving the standardbred racing industry in New Jersey. It should be noted that during the past 18 years, Nancy was a vital member of several Monmouth County committees. She was an active member of the Monmouth County Planning Board, Monmouth County Transportation Council, Monmouth County Amendment Review Subcommittee, Monmouth County Agricultural Development Board, and the Monmouth County Library Commission. After having served such a robust political career, Nancy made the decision not to seek re-election and focus on the next chapter of her life. So when I think of all you've done, it exhausts me.
Want to be Harry when you grow up?
Excuse me. I tell you, it's been a long 18 years, and it wasn't easy.
Oh,
Okay, so you had the benefit of the questions that were posed to Larry, and pretty much you're going to get the same questions again here. Yeah, so if you want to elaborate, please do. Describe your current and past role and other experiences in local government or administration. Your bio has pretty much indicated that, but if you'd like to elaborate, please do.
In my work and the organization that I work with does not reflect my political beliefs at all. I work for them, but I don't have anything to do with the direction that NJEA takes and who they endorse or who they don't endorse. So I just want to be very clear on that. But I will tell you that in Middlesex County, we do a great deal, and I have witnessed a lot of legislative activity and the manner in which various towns and communities work, in addition to my 18 years that I have been involved in Monmouth County politics and politics within my own municipality. So I think when I go over some of the questions, I can speak to what I've witnessed within my own community, what I've witnessed in various towns within Monmouth County that I know of on a personal level, and also what I've seen in Middlesex County in various communities of some of the changes and how they've been affected by some of the outside influences that may take place. So I think some of that has to do with a lot of what I may say today.
Okay, thanks, Nancy. I know you're never at a loss for words.
No, some people would like me to be at a loss for words, but I'm not.
Okay, so as you know, Holmdel operates under the Township Committee form of local government. What do you think works best in the Township Committee form of government?
Ideally, and I know that when I first took office and was first elected, everyone had the same vision. We wanted a community that had a rural character. We were concerned about the quality of life, and we wanted to keep taxes low. And really, it was a vision that was held by the residents of the community, as well as anybody who was considering and wanted to run for Township Committee. As long as a committee acts as a whole, it's not a problem. If all of the committee members have the same vision and that's the sole focus, and that's what they're striving for, and they're working for the best interest of the residents in the community, then a township committee form of government, as it is today, works perfectly fine, as long as every single committee person participates and pulls their weight. And as long as there's no outside interference from other sources, whether it happens to be the county or if it happens to be the state or any other political interference, then it works perfectly fine. I don't see that happening today. And I think that that's where we have run into a problem, certainly within my town, and I think within some of the towns within Monmouth County, and certainly some of the towns within Middlesex. So the township committee may be a form of the past. And I think that that's where there have to be some changes.
Thanks, Nancy. Any questions from anybody else?
You want to elaborate on the issues any more than what you've given us?
That's the next question.
Okay.
Right.
Okay. I think what happens is, first of all, with some of the ways in which you can improve, when we talk about the rotation of the mayor, one of the problems that we have with the rotation of the mayor is you have people that come in for 1 year, and there's no continuity when you move from 1 year to the next, which gives you kind of a problem. So I would eliminate the rotation of the mayor. I think what happens is, if you want to improve the township committee form of government, you have to select appointees to committees, boards, and commissions that have the talent to do the work, have the work ethic and the time, and are committed to the community and no other party outside of what's best for the community. Not a political agency that's outside of your community. No allegiance to anybody who's on the outside. Not to serve any interest outside of Holmdel, not to serve any interest outside of your particular residence. And I'm going to tell you, when we first started, one of our major initiatives were to reassess and choose our professionals based on their expertise and their merit, and not their association, to make sure that their commitment was to the township committee and to the people of our community. So what happened was, we did a whole sweeping change of our professionals, and we brought in people that were not associated or tied to anybody politically, so that we knew that their allegiance was to the township committee and to the residents of our community. Because that's who we wanted them to serve. We didn't want them to serve anybody else except what was best for our community. And I think that that's something that's important if you want to have a township form of government. And I'm going to tell you, it made a big difference. As I've seen over the past 18 years, which is most recently over the last couple of years, that's changed, and that now that's been problematic for us, which I can get into a little bit later.
Okay. Gary and Zach, any other comments or questions?
Well, no, this is getting to the root of what the issues are, right, with this form of government and what could happen to it if it's not kept in check. I think that's what she's telling us. So this is very important. I think what she's sharing with us right now are the issues that can.
What do you think it is about the township form of government that leads to these types of problems?
Well, all right, I'm going to just say, one of the things that we always did is we always made sure that the people that we elected and the people that we chose to run always put the residents first. And if we had individuals who had a self-interest or no longer put the residents first, we purged them. And what we did is we didn't run them again, and we took them off of the committee, or we didn't, put them on the line or whatever. What we did is we basically took them off of the committee, we took them off of the boards or the commissions. If somebody did something that was personally self-serving, and as long as everybody on the township committee and the group that was responsible for putting forward candidates had that in mind, then that worked well. And we were able to be ethically responsible. We served our community was happy, and what we did is we met the needs of the people. When that process was interfered with, and when the local representatives put candidates forward to be put on the township committee, and they were not put on the line, we've had 3 people elected that were not selected by the majority political party in the town that were elected. And just as Larry, you had discussed before, you have people that vote for people that are on the line. They don't know who they are. We've had a candidate that was put on the line, never put an ad out, name didn't go out, nothing went out, but because they were put on the line, they got elected. So now 3 out of 5 people have been elected that were not endorsed by the majority party in the town, but by the county. So now the question is, who runs the town? Certainly not the local people. That's a problem for us.
Thanks, Nancy. Janet, you had
I'm sorry,
a question
Joe.
earlier?
Can I just jump in? I think this is more a comment and really just provide some context and background just for the benefit. I think many of the members here probably understand, but I think Nancy just got into an area where some people who's not familiar with the process may not fully appreciate it. So if I could just take 1 minute. So Nancy, I just want to be clear. Implicit in what you said is that you're also involved with your township's, the official term is county committee.
Correct.
Really the local sort of committee that decides, that's supposed to recruit and vet potential candidates. And interview the party and then support the candidate. Now, in
correct.
full disclosure, my understanding, you're a Republican. So
yes.
You're involved with the Republican County Committee for Millstone.
Correct.
So what I'm saying is that there were candidates that wanted to run, but may or may not have gone through that process, but because they were endorsed or supported by, let's be clear, at the county level. And so they were able to get on the column of line 1, let's call it, and even though that they may have not been supported by the local county committees. That I just want to clear.
Yeah, in the first year, the one candidate was not endorsed. We endorsed 2 candidates. One was not endorsed by our county committee. We held interviews. He was not endorsed, but he was put on the line against the wishes of the majority. Then last year, this past year, we again interviewed candidates. The majority selected 2 candidates, and 2 other candidates who had been interviewed but not selected were told that they were being placed on the line regardless of the fact that we had endorsed 2 candidates, and they were getting the line, and that was it. So our candidates withdrew their petitions and weren't going to bother. So that is what happened. So that's a problem. And it actually, that's a problem. And it really resulted over an individual who wasn't happy with the placement of an affordable housing project, who has the ear of the chairman. That was it. So now what we do, as a result of yesterday's meeting, we have 4 people from that development, which is close to that where that proposed development may go in, that are going to be sitting on the planning board. Those were the appointments that were made. I mean, this is not the type of stuff that should be happening. I mean, you want to talk about misuse of power. This is exactly it. That's why I chose not to run and not to be a part of this. I'm not going to sit by and be a part of this.
So just to be clear, so you're suggesting that if the elections were, say, nonpartisan, then you would have a fairer chance and a better opportunity to get the qualified candidates?
Oh, absolutely. Because you know why? Because people then are going to have to look at who they're voting on. Because I also worked with Rutgers, and Rutgers said that if you have anybody who's off the line, you have a 35% chance, a less chance of getting elected. Being on the line, you have a 35% better chance of getting elected. And if you know anything about the politics, the Democrats in Piscataway, the progressive Democrats, actually have a lawsuit against the way in which people off the line are placed. You're placed out on line 7 if you don't get the line, especially in Monmouth County. So if you're a Republican in the primary and you don't get the line, you're out on line 7. You're practically in the Democratic page. So this is the way people have been punished. This is what happens. So if you are nonpartisan, people don't even look, because then all of a sudden what happens is you get robocalls. Oh, vote line 1, vote line 1. They don't even know who's on line 1. So people will then have to look and say, what's this name? Who do I vote for? So I support the progressive Democrat lawsuit that they have about the way in which the ballots are printed, because of the fact that people are going to have to start to pay attention, because it's the position on the ballot that really gives people an advantage depending on where they are. And it's been a big game, and it's something that I've certainly researched, and I've had discussions with Rutgers, certain people in Rutgers, about the whole process. So I really hope it goes through. So honestly, I think a nonpartisan election gives people an opportunity to look at people and to really question, who is it that I'm voting for? What is this name? Who is it? Am I voting for an 18-year-old kid? Am I voting for a 25-year-old kid? Or am I voting for somebody who is an adult, or somebody who has a business? Who am I voting for? People are so apathetic. They don't do anything. And Larry, as you said, they just rely on, oh, they're on that line. They're a Republican or they're a Democrat. They have no idea of who they're voting for or what they're doing, and they just go down Democrat, Republican, and I'm going to tell you, it's hurting our communities, and it's hurting a lot of our communities in Monmouth County. And I can see the difference over the 18 years. It's more drastic over the last 6 years than I've ever seen before, and it's frightening.
Thanks,
And I've
Nancy.
seen, yeah, I'm sorry.
No, thanks, Nancy. We want to move on, but before we move on, any questions to, Nancy's done a good job of, go ahead, Janet.
You answered most of what I was going to ask, but in addition to the fact that people are put on the line, that may not be what the local party would like. Once those people are on, then the people that are selected to help the town, the engineers, the professionals, they're also, that also gets skewed according to maybe something that not the local
Contributions.
interests.
Well, this is the first year that they'll have the majority that none of us are on. So those changes haven't taken place, but and people just have to do a little research. All you have to do is just look at the organizational agendas of towns throughout Monmouth County. And you'll see what I mean. I don't have to go any further than to say that. It's a big eye opener. And I've looked at the organizational agendas going back in towns, and you'll see the same names come up time after time, place after place, and it's just a big spider web.
Okay.
Bill, what I was going to say is national politics obviously plays a big role in how people vote. And the alignment with a specific political party usually starts at the national level and comes down. So what I hear you saying is it shouldn't be something that drives a municipal election necessarily, because municipal issues are much different sometimes than the national issues are. And the national issues, don't even come into play in many cases at the municipal level, but it can be used to distort because of conflicts of interest, using a specific political party to get people on line one. That's what I'm hearing you say. Is that accurate?
Are you asking me or are you asking Bill?
I'm asking you.
Yeah, I think so. And to tell you the truth, in the research that I've done, the nonpartisan elections take place in May. So it can take you right out of the realm and take you away from those national partisan elections, which really would be a fairer election, where people really would have to take the time to research and see what's best for their community. That would be, I would love to see that in our community, have our election in May, so people can focus on what's best for my community, rather than being locked into, who they're going to vote for president or who they're going to vote for governor, and then just go straight down the line and get locked into something different. Because what's happening in my community is much different than what's happening anywhere else.
Right. Sounds like you need a charter study commission.
Oh, believe me, I'm interested.
Yeah.
I didn't die. I came off the committee, but I'm out here. I got a lot of time on my hands now.
Okay. Very good. Thank you for your being so clear about this. It's very good, actually.
Okay, let's move on now to, we've done 3. Question 4, under the Township Committee form of government, the mayor is elected by the members of the Township Committee at the beginning of the year and serves a 1-year term. The mayor is directly elected by the voters in other forms of government. Do you have any thoughts, comments on the mayor being directly elected by the voters instead of the Township Committee?
Okay. All right. In Millstone, during the first 10 years, I was mayor for 9 out of the first 10. And I basically had the same deputy mayor during that time. And I'm going to tell you, we got a lot of work done. There was consistency. There was leadership. We did a lot of short-term and long-term planning. We had a lot of financial stability. We developed our second and third round COA plans, right to farm plans, resource inventory, tremendous amount of land preservation. We had active boards and commission involvement. Everybody was on the same page. And I'm going to tell you, it was really a very productive time. Tremendous master plan. We had a great planner. Everybody was on the same page. Bill can tell you, it was really a tremendous time. The one negative thing that existed during that time was the other township committee people were not as involved as they should have been. They weren't as involved as they should have been because of their work responsibilities. At that particular time, we had one that was an attorney. He just didn't have the time to spend. We had another one that was a teacher in New York, Ray. He just really didn't have the time to spend. And a lot of it was left on the backs of my back and my deputy mayor's back. And I will tell you, we basically had carried the ball because I had a very flexible schedule. He worked from home and we did a lot of it. But we worked as a group. And before, when we talked about the mayor being the spokesperson and so on and so forth, the mayor should be the spokesperson, but their line should never be any different than anybody on the committee. Everybody on the committee has to have the same line. And I think for all of those years, we always had the same line. It was always rural character, quality of life, low taxes. Those were the three things that if you talk to anybody or anybody in the community, those were the three things that you got. Even if they didn't believe it, that's what they said. It was almost like rote memory. It was like they were programmed. Those were the things I think that were positive. But that's not really true. And I don't know if in Holmdel, if you have people that have the time to work on subcommittees and put extra time in. I'm going to tell you, over my 18 years, we could barely get people to come together to do a work group. We wanted to have a work group so that we could discuss stuff before a meeting. Couldn't even get them to come and do that. They didn't have the time. They didn't have the desire. They didn't want to do it. And they just didn't want to meet. And it was very problematic, even after that time. When we started to rotate, the positive part about that is that the committee members who had never been mayor became involved and learned what the process was. They didn't know how to do a budget. They didn't understand the budget. So now they had to, for that year that they were mayor, they had to understand the budgeting process. And what they did is they now became knowledgeable on some of the issues. But what was unfortunate is that it took them the entire year to learn. They didn't develop plans beyond that time, so the long-term and the short-term planning stopped. And what happened is it lacked any continuity of any planning from year to year to year. It's like after they became mayor, things stopped, and they just started with somebody new who started the process and now had to learn, and then they started again. So there was never anything that went beyond. They never wanted to form focus groups, and I don't know what the fear was about talking to the community, because they're your people, they're your constituents, and there was a reluctance to do that. So I really didn't think that was good. I think it is important to elect a mayor, and I like the idea of having a mayor, not somebody who has veto power, because you don't want somebody who does that. But I think that the residents, and this should be done only in a nonpartisan election, because you don't need some clown from some other entity putting, his pawn into your community, to mess things up. So only in a nonpartisan election would I want an elected mayor. But the voters can elect somebody that they see as a leader, somebody that they think has leadership qualities. somebody that they feel has a vision for the community that they can buy into, somebody that they think is a problem solver, that they say, you know what, this person has a pretty good head on their shoulders. They seem like they can solve problems or they can get people together. Even though that person may not give them the answers, they have to be able to trust them. And it's got to be, you have one person that's going to be able to coordinate and follow through with issues. And I think it's got to be somebody that they can trust. So I do like the idea of the residents electing a mayor, and that person has to be a special person. And I think that the residents should be able to pick that person out.
Nancy, did you have an effect of a township administrator there in Millstone?
Well, we went through several township administrators. We had, people get into a position, and then, sometimes what happens is positions get to their head, and then they take advantage. And that happened with a couple of administrators that we had, and we thought we had some good people. And then, we found out that some things were happening that shouldn't be happening. So we had to let them go. And then we had a real good administrator that had come to us from another town. And he did a great job, but the deputy mayor at that time was a little bit too harsh. And he didn't give him the respect that he deserved, and he left. And then it was difficult to get somebody. Finally, our clerk became our administrator. She did a good job, and then she retired, and then we wound up getting somebody in that we just gave a 3-year contract to last year, who was a community person. He moved out of the town, and he's doing a good job. But unfortunately, we have township committee people that don't know what their boundaries are. And sometimes that creates a problem. You have to know, let your township administrator handle the personnel issues. And sometimes we have people that want to go in and interfere, and you can't do that. So setting those boundaries have been problematic for us.
Okay.
You're
Thank
talking
you.
about folks on the committee didn't know where.
Yes,
Oh.
and they don't listen.
Mhm.
Thanks, Nancy. We'll move on to the next question. Holmdel Township's committee consists of 5 members who are elected at large by the residents for terms of 3 years on a staggered basis. Effectively, this means a local election every year. Other forms of local government have 1 to 3 years between local elections. What are your thoughts about annual local elections or otherwise?
Oh, anything that can be done to avoid an annual election is positive. They're costly, and what they do is they consume a great deal of time, which takes individuals away from the task at hand, and it serves very little benefit to anyone, especially the residents. So to tell you the truth, if you can avoid them, I think it's best. And if you can just focus on the residents, and you can do it in some staggered form every 2 years and rotate in some manner, that would be, I think, beneficial to everyone involved.
Any questions from the team?
Well,
Thank you.
Yes, wait 1 second. Okay, so you wouldn't have elections every year, but you'd want it staggered so that you would have people that have experience on, so not everybody would get off at the same time, right?
Correct. Yeah, so you might have, if you had 4-year terms, you might have, like every 2 years, you might have a certain number of people that would go off.
Thanks for clarifying that, and thanks, Janet, for asking the question. Okay, next one. Statutorily, the Township Committee is limited to 3 or 5 members. Holmdel Township's committee has 5. Millstone also had 5. Do you have any thoughts or comments on increasing or decreasing the number of members on the form of government, whatever form of government?
Well, to tell you the truth, I kind of agree with Larry. I think that anywhere between 5 to 7 is sufficient and beneficial to make decisions. You know, I certainly wouldn't go below 5. And I think if you have an elected mayor, that gives you 6, but you don't want necessarily an even number, because I think the mayor should have an opportunity to cast a vote. And be a part of the decision making. So that brings us up to 7, but I certainly wouldn't want anything above 7. I think if you go beyond that number, it becomes too many people. It becomes difficult to get to make decisions, and you get bogged down with too much minutia.
Okay, questions from anybody?
No.
Okay, I think we handled question number 7, but I'll give you an opportunity to elaborate if you want. Elections under the Township Committee form are held on a partisan basis. This means that we have 2 local elections every year, a primary in June and a general election in November. Other forms of local government allow for council members to be elected on a nonpartisan basis. Do you have any additional thoughts on this as nonpartisan, such as done for the Board of Elections, Board of Education?
I think I've said a lot. I hope my car is out there when I get out there.
Somebody else turned the key, though.
Yeah. We're speaking totally of local elections, which are considerably different than the state and the national level. And the local elections should be based solely on the needs of the individual community. And I'm going to say it again. If the local parties choose a candidate through the vetting process that meets the needs of the community without interference from any outside party, that's wonderful. But that has not been the case throughout much of what we've seen. And I explained to you what happened in our community and many other communities. So I think that with the nonpartisan, people are forced to research their candidates. It's less expensive, and it'll keep others out of local politics, and residents can choose their own destiny.
Okay, any other questions, comments? Okay, let's move on. Members of the Township Committee government are elected on an at-large basis. Do you think the citizens of a township would be better represented if we elected some or all members of the committee by wards or subsections in the township? What are your thoughts?
It's always great to say, oh, I think, you want to see people represented from each of the areas. However, sometimes we may not have people in a particular area that may be interested. And I always like to see people on a township committee or a township council or whatever you want to call it that have varying talents that can add to the committee. Whether it happens to be finance or if it happens to be environmental. So I always like to see people that are going to be running or serve on a group that can bring us a particular expertise or a different expertise to the township. And my concern with finding representatives from each ward is it could be problematic. Are there people who are interested in doing the work? I mean, do they have the time? What's their expertise? Do they have the same vision of what you have for your community? So I think that that's important. And I think that, in order to overcome that idea of knowing what, if you have a ward that may not be represented, focus groups can provide the feedback that's necessary for the township committee to make informed decisions about community concerns. And I think sometimes we try to stay away from that because we're afraid. I don't know why people are afraid to bring people in, bringing in a group of people to say, what is it that you think? What would you like to see? Residents actually welcome that, and they want to be included. They don't always come in with pitchforks and gas lights. You know, they want to be included. They want to know that you're interested in knowing what they want. And that actually has been one of the problems that we've had. We've had people on the township committee didn't want to ask anybody anything, didn't want to tell them what we were doing, wanted to keep everything hidden. But they're the biggest ones to go out there and say, we want transparency. But they were the less transparent people that you ever had. Wouldn't tell anybody anything, wouldn't ask anything, didn't want to discuss anything. And I think that that's wrong. The more open you are, the more you include, and if you have a great working township council or committee, and what you do is you can get people to go out there and have some of these focus groups, it really will benefit the community well.
Thank you. Any questions? Okay, let's move on to the second to the last. With the exception of bond ordinance, the township committee form of local government does not provide for an initiative or a referendum by petition from the township citizens. What are your thoughts about that?
I think that they should be able to ask questions. And I really do think that if they had a certain number of signatures, that they should be able to have questions put on the ballot. Sometimes I get a little nervous about that. You know, we're a town that's all well water and septic. I don't think anybody would ever approach me and say to me, we want to bring in sewers and public water. They would never say that to me. But you know, that would be like one of those things I would go crazy about. But what it does is it forces you to educate people. If there's some kind of crazy thing, like something that they have out there in California, some of those crazy initiative and referendum stuff that they come up with, that you would really have to educate your people to say, look, you got to be crazy if you think that this is going to go on. And you'd have to really spend some time talking to them. And I think you just have more of an intimate relationship with your community to know where they're going, that you can kind of offset the crazies in your community. So I don't think they would ever get the numbers, but I think they should feel free that they could put things on the ballot if they felt it was that important.
Questions, anybody? Okay, here's the last one. I think you've answered this throughout the presentation, but I'll give you a chance to elaborate. And for once, I'd just like you to speak your mind, Nancy. If you could make changes to the form of government, what would they be and why?
Okay. Certainly, I would like to see nonpartisan elections with the ability of residents to elect a strong mayor who can provide leadership with the support of 4 to 6 council members. That would be my ideal. And totally eliminate that would totally eliminate the influence from any outside political forces. And I think that would make for a better community support system in each municipality in the county. So I think I was pretty blunt and to the point.
When you say a strong mayor, to have veto power? I mean, how?
No, oh, no.
Okay, just
I wouldn't.
A mayor that has duties to perform.
Yeah, I when I say a strong mayor, I'm not talking about like just somebody who's like meek and mild, somebody who believes in the vision of what the community is, somebody who's not afraid to go out and speak to residents, somebody who's not afraid to tell residents this is what the town believes in, and it may not be what you believe in, but this is what we're doing and why we're doing it. Somebody who has the ability to communicate with people. That's what I mean by a strong mayor. I would never, oh, believe me, I would never ever say that any elected official should have veto power over anybody. And I'm going to tell you, in the event, and I'm one of those people, and you can ask Bill, if there's somebody that's not doing the right thing and all of a sudden they're not working for the community or the residents, they got to go. And I'll be the first one to tell them they got to go.
So should there be
That's
a
what you gotta
recall
do.
process?
Huh?
Should there be a recall process available?
Let me, you know what? I don't have a problem with a recall process. And I won't, I think that constitutions and bylaws have a recall process, and those recall processes have been upheld by the courts, even though some people don't like to recognize that the recall process, if it isn't a constitution and bylaws, can be used. But they are legal if they are procedurally correct and followed. So, I mean, if someone does something that's inappropriate, then they shouldn't be in office. If they do something that really is not for the residents, I mean, that would probably be something illegal that they're doing. But if you have some people that are just doing something that's behind somebody's back, or doing something that's untoward, you have a conversation with that person and say, look, this is not for the community. This is for your own benefit, and that's not appropriate. You got to stop that, or, there's going to be some problems and you're going to lose the support of the residents, and, somebody's going to run against you.
Okay, that wraps up the questions. Nancy, thank you. You've been a wonderful speaker. Likewise, Larry, you've given us a lot to think about, and we appreciate it.
All right. Thank you very much.
Thank you,
I'll
guys.
turn it back to
Very
you.
good.
Thank you very much.
Okay.
Nancy.
Have a great night.
Thank you.
Right. You too.
All right. So that's it for our business on the formal agenda. So we do have a few attendees. So I'm gonna open up, unless there's anything else, any other commissioners, I will open up for public comment. Anything else from any other commissioners? Okay. So bear with me, everybody. This is kind of new. I've been on Zoom, but this is a different form of Zoom. It's on a webinar kind of form. So we do have 5 attendees. If there's anyone who wishes to make a comment or public question, could you raise your hand? If you look on the lower bottom, there's a little raise hand thing that you could click on, I believe, and then we'll call upon you. And as usual, if you do want to ask questions, make a comment, state your name, address, and I'll give you guys time to think about whether you want it. So far, as far as I can tell, no one has raised their hand. Is that? Oh, Brian, of course. Okay. Brian, you should be able to talk right now, I think.
Brian McMullen, 3 Burgundy Drive. Just a clarification question. I've heard the words mayor with veto power and mayor with break ties. In what form of municipal government does a mayor have a veto power?
I think we're jumping a little bit ahead right now. So I don't know if Kevin, you want to jump in a little bit, but right now we're in a phase where we're trying to study our current form of government in terms of township committee. In phase 2, we will be looking to explore some of the other alternatives. And I think that would be a great question to do that.
The comment has been made by a couple of people during the course of this conversation, because during the course of this. So I was just curious if there was something that people know.
Yeah, so there are a lot of different forms, and I think as they, once we get through this phase and as we look to explore other options, those will come up naturally. I would, because right now, I think I know one answers to one or two of them, but it won't be as comprehensive, I suspect. And I think other members here probably do know one or two. There are different forms. So as we explore the different forms, I think that would be a natural place to ask that question, unless anyone wants to jump in on that. So, it varies with different forms, and right now we're not at that stage, and I don't think any of us are well-versed, maybe with the exception, one or two, but it's, I'll give you an example in and I'm not recommending this, I'm just using it as an example, in a borough council form of government, the mayor does not vote except in a tie. So that's an example where they're voting. There are other forms of government where certain, I believe, ordinances and certain things, actions taken by the council will be forwarded to the mayor, and the mayor have X number of days to, sign that into law effectively and or veto, in which case it goes back to the council. And there is a required number that can override a veto. Again, I think we're jumping a little bit ahead, but that hopefully give you some examples of other forms of government where the mayor is not for lack of a better term, equal member as it is under the township committee form of government. It is in fact separate from that, whereas right now, besides what we call ceremonial duty and presiding over the meeting, it is one of 5 equal members under the township committee form of government.
Thank you very much. I'll ask it when it comes up again.
Thank you. Okay. Rose Oxley, can you please state your name and address?
Hi, Rose Oxley. I'm at 28 Sherrill Lane in Clarksburg, which is Millstone Township. I've worked very closely with Nancy. I was on the township committee, also on some of the boards, open space, as well as the planning board. And I just wanted to ask, during the candidate, looking at candidates that are going to run for township committee, there is no background check ever done. The question is, once they get elected, isn't it the responsibility of the town or the town clerk or somebody in the town to do a background check on those candidates that are now all of a sudden have been elected are officials?
That's probably not a question that's appropriate for us. I think, Kevin probably has the answer to it as a township attorney, but that's, I'm going to exercise some this way. Go ahead, Kevin.
Just a short answer to that. The answer is that background checks are not conducted on candidates or elected officials. There are very few reasons that they can be disqualified, meaning they're not permitted to be an elected official or a candidate, and that is typically handled by the prosecutor's office. So that's sort of the short answer. But there are no official background checks that are really authorized to be conducted.
So actually, and if I get a new job, I have a background check that's being done on me. We're saying that anybody who basically becomes an official, there's no background checks on them at this point.
That is correct.
So sorry, Rose, I want to make sure that we're not providing a legal advice here. Kevin happened to be an attorney, but we are a charter study commission, but an answer was thrown in there. But you should be aware that in other public bodies, such as the Board of Education, there are often things that are sworn in and specifically says that they are qualified under certain statutes and that they haven't been convicted and others. But again, we're not providing legal advice, and that's really not a subject. I appreciate the question. That's probably not something that we're looking into right now under looking at the Township Committee form of government.
In,
Yep.
I just want to point out that Sheila Gilstein is now shown as a panelist as opposed to an attendee, but she does have her hand raised.
Okay.
Maybe you might want to recognize her or somebody else, but
Yeah.
don't lose her from the list because somehow she got moved to the panelists.
All right. I will. Forgive me, guys. I'm still trying to.
I think that's the only other hand up, so you could just
Yeah.
recognize her.
I am trying. So let's see.
You did it. Can you hear me?
Yep. Perfect.
Yeah.
Okay, my name is Sheila Gilstein. I'm at 11 Chardonnay Drive, and full disclosure, I'm married to one of the people on the commission. What I wanted to say is I wanted to commend the commission for being open to listening to these former mayors of town, different towns. They have a lot of experience to share, and some of them, they've been very open and honest, and I think that that's a really important quality that we're listening to. And it
Hey,
takes
man,
and it takes a lot of courage
I did.
and vulnerability.
I asked a question. You did a good job.
Okay, so I'm still talking. Someone else is talking?
I've just muted. I think it's someone left the mic on. Go ahead.
Okay. So I wanted to say it takes a lot of courage and vulnerability when you look at yourself and your own local government and look at what's best for the people. So I think that having a commission doesn't necessarily mean you want to change everything, but what it does mean is that you have the courage to look at what we have and see if it's the best thing for our town. So I wanted to thank you for doing that.
Thank you, Sheila.
Thank you, Sheila.
Appreciate that.
Yeah, I appreciate the help. If anyone else see any raised hand that I miss. So right now, I'm not seeing any. Does anyone see anything?
Okay.
I don't know whether we can request this, but when somebody comes in and they have a name that doesn't identify themselves, is it appropriate, like there's somebody there called Scorpio? Can we ask that individual to identify themselves, or is that not appropriate?
I'm going to make a suggestion that, it's if we have an in-person meeting and there's someone in the audience, unless there's something really objectionable, I guess. I've seen people with different names, but if we had an in-person meeting and someone's sitting there, you really don't know. So at the moment, my thinking is that we'll allow that unless we see some actions that really interrupts our process.
Okay.
Any other question? I want to make sure, because this technology is new to me, that I want to make sure, again, and if anyone else sees it, let me know. I do not see any more raised hands. All right, seeing none, I'm going to close public comment. And I want to thank everybody. This has been quite an eye-opener, and it's been very interesting. It is our first dive into our formal study process. The first couple of meetings have been more organizational and planning and so on. So this has been very interesting. I ask for a motion to adjourn the meeting then.
Move.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Great, thank you. This meeting is adjourned.
Good night.
Thank you.
Too much.
Good night, all.
See you next week.
Yep.
Night, everybody.